Welcome to the Vine Resources Podcast Show with your host, David Lawrence.
Welcome to another edition of the Vine Resources Podcast Show. Well, today I'm delighted to have with us Martin Cassin. Martin is the CEO of Upvist. He's over in Berlin, Germany. Martin, thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
Martin, we're right into June this year. Well, I can't believe we're in the middle of the year, actually. It's obviously flown by. It's probably a bit of a blur for many people. I'd love to hear what it's like for you. But before we come up to speed, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and who Upvist is, if that's okay?
Yeah, no problem. So my name is Martin. I started this company in 2017. Originally, actually started after university in the private equity space, invested in a couple of software business all over Europe. Some of them successful, some of them less successful, and then joined another company after my private equity career called Shopko as a COO and a co-founder, which was in the payment space. Moved the company to San Francisco and ultimately could sell this business to Klarna. Came back from San Francisco to Berlin, my hometown actually. Joined a company builder back then called FinLeap, and after let's say 9 months, I came up with the idea of Upvest, which was originated then in 2017. We are around 30 people right now, based in Berlin, have some scattered engineers all over the world. And what we actually offer is a full stack asset tokenization platform for companies that would like to create digital securities, that would like to custody these digital securities, and those that actually would like to distribute the securities and clear them via some fiat rails. So for instance, if you're a business that sells real estate securities in a traditional way, you can now do this in a digital way. And this way can have it faster, cheaper, and also across borders, which opens up, let's say, a complete user experience for neobanks and neo-brokers. So those are actually our partners, but also on the asset management side, big asset managers use us to actually digitalize their security offering and enable like an international distribution.
Mm-hmm. Now, we talked just before we started the podcast today, and we were talking about trust in the market. Obviously, big story recently came out, of course, with Wirecard. And the issues with that money somewhere in the Philippines, potentially, and somewhere else. Obviously, I'm sure it's a big story in Germany as well. How do you see these kind of things impacting that customer trust and whether it impacts you directly or not? But how does that impact the market? And what are the things that organizations can do moving forward?
This was a big one actually with Wirecard last week, or actually even going into this week. It was for us all a big surprise, to be honest, because Wirecard was one of these tech companies that everyone was pretty proud about. I think a couple of things are within actually this kind of fintech nightmare. One is pretty much that Ernst & Young probably did a pretty bad job in auditing them. So we probably have to review how these companies do the audits. It was the same situation when you remind yourself in the financial crisis. There were also like these big auditors that didn't do their work pretty diligently, and at the end of the day, we all had to suffer. So there's probably like a mistrust towards these auditors, and we probably need a little bit more transparency about the numbers that actually these companies actually really have. And one of these advantages that we see with using, let's say, our technology and open source blockchains is that you have full auditability at any time, 24/7, and you can really see who has what kind of funds. And you see also what kind of assets are pretty much on this blockchain. So this is, I think, something that accelerates our business, but also the whole trend of open finance, that you have even like independent auditors that can have a look into these books, even anonymously, and can validate if the numbers are correct or not. So when you think about finance in the next 10 years, I'm pretty convinced that a lot of these parts will be open source, at least close to open source, that there will be more validators that actually can control this. Because one of the difficulties the government has, they have to rely on certain intermediaries, silos like auditors. But if these auditors have a wrong incentive scheme to actually getting paid, then this doesn't solve the puzzle. And I think if everything is a little bit more open banking, open source, say blockchains eventually in the future, then these things could potentially be prevented.
Tell us if we take a step back to 2017, the very early days of the company. What did it look like, those first early days, and how did the product develop? How did the team develop? And how did you come up with the idea? How did that go? Tell us about those early days.
I certainly had less gray hair. that's for sure. So it was crazy times. So in 2017, everything was about ICOs. Pretty much everyone in finance wanted to invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, but also in some ICOs that nobody really understood back then. So we also got excited about it because it was the first time that actually the younger generation wanted to invest. When you look at the ratio of people that invest in stocks in Germany, it's literally just at 8%, so pretty low, despite the fact that it's actually a pretty good asset category with an 8% return over many years. And there was a time that pretty much everyone in a generation of 20 to 40 wanted to invest in ICOs because they wanted to get like a quick green buck. And the second one that actually astonished me back then, that a lot of engineers were super excited about finance. It was the first time actually engineers were talking about, let's say, smart contracts, about certain consensus algorithms and these kind of things. And it was never the case that a lot of engineers said, oh, wow, actually, I really want to go into finance. It was always like this salesy-driven, masculine environment. Right now, it was like this open environment and people really can create certain things. And that actually triggered us to start the company in the first place, building something that is open and enables more, let's say, democracy in finance and enables more business models and a more globalization around these different things. But, that was the first thought. We went into this kind of ICO hype and built some technology around this. It took us like 6 to 9 months to get like massive volume. So it was a little bit like being on a roller coaster. But after 6 to 9 months, the whole market was taken away. And this is pretty difficult when you run a company, because if you hire people, they get excited about the mission and vision and building open finance, and suddenly all of your customers are gone, your money runs out, then you have to reinvent yourself. We luckily did this. We always had a strong engineering culture. We always looked at the long-term goal of this business, building like an open finance infrastructure around this. But I can tell you, it was crazy. It was crazy because you had to hire a lot of people. It went up super quickly. We had a lot of money quickly, but then everything was gone from one day to the other. But I'm very proud that we survived and actually are much stronger than back in the days and have now a really pretty superior company.
Fantastic. And I know you said, you're 30 people strong, the company's growing. Tell us a bit more about, the product and how it works. And for those who don't understand it, maybe in simple terms, and what does your typical, customer base look like?
Yeah, maybe just to start with the customer base. So when you look at the financial market, you typically have a separation between asset managers and those that sell these assets. So the typical banks sell assets, and then asset managers could be, for instance, funds that create, a portfolio of different assets that you can buy a fraction of. And this separation is still also prevalent with a lot of different our customers. But I think something that is a fundamental shift is that the distributors change now. So the traditional banks, they lost a lot of trust. They're not really digital. And they try to build a digital experience, but they very often fail. And if you look at actually our mobile phones, we work with a Revolut, we work with a Number 26, we work with a TransferWise. So it's a completely different user experience that is global, that's instant, a great user experience. But those actually apps that don't really sell a lot of these traditional assets. And one of the things that we actually do in our product is to digitalize the traditional securities and make them available at these, call them neo brokers and neo banks, in a very simple and slick experience and across borders, also at lower costs. So this is in a nutshell what we do. And there are a lot of different products that we have to build in between. So one is the process of creating these digital securities with smart contracts. So the asset manager has a cockpit, how to manage these smart contracts, and also have this compliant and safely. Then there's the other one where we also BaFin license, which is the custody of these digital securities. So the whole private key management, the safekeeping of these assets, which typically runs in the back. So nobody really knows that we are doing this, but this is something where we are licensed and also supervised. And the third element of this pipe is pretty much the clearing of these assets. So when I want to sell my asset, I want to get the respective euro amount or US dollar amount. And this is also something that we start exploring. So when you now want to connect like an asset manager and neo broker, we offer like the full stack in between. And our vision at a certain point of time is to build like this open securities network that you can connect between the different fintechs, but you can also connect between the different asset managers and pool the liquidity, that you at the end of the day have more flexibility as an end user, and you have also more freedom, although I don't like to use this term, but it's very often used in these kind of markets.
Yeah, I'm sure. And have you found that it's quite a vanilla approach for all the customers, or is it very, very, very different to lots of different companies? What's your experience?
So we define 3 types of customers. So typically we are made for these neo brokers and neo banks. They have already digital experience and they have to continue having the superior experience, having superior assets. So they have some pressure from the end user side to deliver on their promise to have like everything fast and easy. So for them, it's pretty easy to communicate because they understand it's more about growth than about like the smallest margin. And for them, you pretty much get in the conversation pretty quickly. When you go to traditional asset managers, they don't really have a digital experience and they sell to traditional banks. that you have to do a lot of education around. So what is actually the benefit of asset tokenization? How reliable is this? How secure is this? Are you guys licensed? Who are you guys actually, right? So there you have to do actually a lot of hand-holding to get them across the finish line, and takes typically also 6 to 12 months to get an asset manager on your side to do like a POC. And then once it works and they see this is like faster, cheaper, and so on, then they give you more assets over the time. And then there's the third category, we call them value-added resellers. Those are platforms that also sell these assets sometimes, but very often also consultancies. So like a BCG or Deloitte, they go also heavily into this market because they think that this can give massive efficiency gains. And we also talk with them and try to empower them with our tech stack, but also with our license that they can resell our solution to certain clients.
Got it. Fantastic. Now we're as I said before earlier, we're in June now, halfway through the year. We've been for an interesting few months. What's been the last few months like for you? And can you share what a typical day in the business looks like for you right now?
All right, I start pretty much with how Corona started impacting us, because that's, I think, what you would like to hear. It was crazy. So at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of conferences and everything was pretty much tuned towards asset tokenization. So the BaFin created a new license in Germany just for the safekeeping of these digital assets, the custody license, which we obtained. We went to a couple of conferences in Paris and in Frankfurt, and there was really, really strong momentum from a lot of companies, even big clients. Then Corona came in, and it was like an artificial break. Suddenly everyone went home. Everyone had to refocus on their strategy. Everyone had to really think about what is actually the core we would like to build, what kind of people we want to hire, how do we want to spend our money. For us, it was an amazing time because, when you run a business for 2.5 years or 3 years, you have a lot of slack with you, a lot of fat with you, and you could really focus on what is the most important. So we actually had to also say goodbye to a couple of people in our company and hired 11 new employees in this time period. So for us, we had also the benefit that we are very much funded and could hire amazing people from TransferWise, from Onfido, from Deutsche Bank, from Goldman Sachs, and so on. So it was for us a time of refocusing, and we came out much stronger after Corona. So in Germany, Berlin, we talk already about after Corona because everything is going so well. So this was actually great for us. And I think if there wouldn't have been Corona, probably would have rushed too quickly into certain customer agreements, into hiring plans, and also keep it on going on the people we had. So for me personally, as a founder and also for the company, I think it was a very healthy process.
And I don't know what your policy is around working from home, but I'm curious to see how the company adapted to that work from home. What the challenges were, and what do you see the opportunities for yourself and the wider industry going forward?
So I think the industry was a bit radical pretty quickly, saying, hey, remote first is now the paramount strategy. I think actually that working remote has some benefits, certainly, but I also think that working in the office has some massive benefits. We hired like 11 people, and when you have to onboard a lot of people, it's not so easy to actually transfer the culture. The onboarding, pretty much the whole knowledge sharing makes it a little more complicated. So there's an interesting statistic. Typically, when you communicate remotely, just on Slack or on the phone, there's an 80% likelihood that you interpret the information negatively when you don't know the person on the other side, because you have not built the trust lines. And this is specifically difficult when you have a younger generation that actually still has to prove themselves and don't know, do I go left or do I go right? And this cultural framework actually is pretty much harder to embed into the company when you do it remotely. The good thing, though, about us is that we are a software company and we have a lot of engineers, and we could immediately switch, let's say, from an office kind of work first to a remote first for the time being. But we kept it open that people can come into the office if they want to. They can also stay at home if they think this is more productive, but at certain touch points, they have to be in. So when we have like an offsite, if you have an OKR meeting, if we have a big company presentation and so on, if you do a meetup, then they have to come into the office to experience the culture. And the funny thing is, we're still like mostly engineers in the company. Most people like to come into the office, and we gave them the flexibility. And our office is again now totally full because they love working together, love the creative process. But that being said, some people also, when they get like a package delivery, or if their kids are at home because nobody can take care of them, then they use the flexibility also to stay at home. And I think it's the mix that makes the company really strong, that you have a really strong culture that allows you to do a lot of things, but that you also willingly come into the office to grow the people around you.
Mm-hmm. No problem. And in terms of the perhaps that period of time where people were working at home and they weren't obviously able to come in the office, how did you keep that motivation between yourself, and how did you keep that communication lines open? What worked well for you?
Yeah, it was not so easy, especially for the younger generation. So we tried to have many touch points during the day. So we had an all hands on Monday where we pretty much were talking also about private stuff. We ran through our private apartments, did some jokes, we had a beer. These kind of things were pretty much helpful. We use Slack a lot anyway, so we try to involve as many people in our conversations as possible, and also always had a video and not shut off the video. I did a lot of coffee meetings, so it was not allowed pretty much to meet in the bigger group, but what I tried to do is to meet people for lunch or for coffee, just to get a feeling for this. And we're one of the first companies actually in Berlin that actually started working from home. Looking at the numbers, but we were also one of the first companies coming back into the office. So it didn't impact us too much because I think we were pretty rational on the numbers and made the right decisions at the early stage. But I have to say some people got a little bit demotivated, and we had to, as leaders, manage them a little bit more closely.
What sort of advice could you perhaps give, and anything that you learned where you've gone through this tremendous business change? Is there anything that you've reflected on that you would that you feel you could share with others, and things that you've really learned from this period?
Radical candor, I think, is important. So really talk about how it is. It was a difficult time. Really be factual also with the facts, and don't come up with a vision that eventually is not really sustainable. I try to always keep a very personal touch with the people around me. So calling them, having these video calls, which helped a lot. I think to keep the trust lines. I gave a lot of comfort. So we actually had to let go 7 people, or we hired also 11 people. After we let the 7 people go, we also said, this is it. Everyone else stays in the company. We have enough money. So you can be here for as many years as we still have the funds, obviously, right? So to give the comfort that they also are safe, I think it was very important, especially when you had to fire a lot of people during the crisis. And this made, I think, also our culture stronger.
Understood. Now, moving forward, as you said, in Germany, things are a little bit better than some other parts of the world. Things are opening up again. But what's now exciting you, do you think, in your industry, and how do you see things looking in the next maybe 12 to 18 months, if you can look that far ahead?
So we see that the digital experience is certainly really important for our customers. It's more important than previously. So when we talk to bigger asset managers, they really think about how can we actually sell our securities to different customer audiences internationally and cheaper. And we talk about the biggest asset managers in Germany that really have board presentations. So this was completely different, let's say, before Corona. And on the distribution side, let's say these fintechs and neo brokers, I think for them, they get like a massive boost. So when you look at these neo brokers like Trade Republic or Robinhood in the US, they grow so vastly. And now they have to think about how can we make more out of this, right? So how can we get more customers outside of our home turf? How can we actually onboard more assets? So this is also an accelerator. I would say that everything gets a little bit faster. We still have to prove, though, that the whole topic of asset tokenization is really a replacement of the current infrastructure where the whole educational piece comes in. So we still expect long sales cycles, a lot of discussions with different people in the organization. But I think overall, the trajectory is clearer and more likely to happen, I think, in the next 2 years than before Corona.
Fantastic. Martin, as a final point, and again, there might be some learnings from this one, but if you were giving your 20-year-old self one piece of advice now, just looking back, what's the one thing that you would say to yourself?
Well, that's a tough one. Be more mindful, listen more. Those two. So maybe just to explain a little bit on this. I think when you're young, you still want to prove yourself that you're worth something, and you sometimes forget to listen to those that really want to support you. And I think I was too long too stubborn, and I was too long too fearful to do things. So the whole meditation and being mindful, being open, really changed my perspective on many things and helped me also to be a better leader and also probably a better person in life.
I might share that advice with my 11-year-old son, who's hassling me every day to build a new website. Martin, thank you for sharing that. If people want to connect with you, want to reach out to find out more about Upvest and connect with you, what's the best way they can do that?
On LinkedIn, that's the easiest.
There you go. So look up Martin Kessing on LinkedIn at Upvest, put it in there, and make sure if you are connected with him, just add a personal note. Perhaps you said you listened to this podcast. Martin, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck for the rest of the year. And look forward to hearing about more about the business for 2021.
Thank you very much.
We really hope you enjoyed the podcast today. If you want to listen to more exclusive tips and life lessons from our guest, go to the resources page at vineresources.com.